Yeah, I was trying to get this guy here working, and apparently it and Zoom don't play well together.
What is that?
The microphone we bought for recording.
Oh.
Then again, I probably could have taken some time earlier when I was going through the slides to try to set this up properly and make sure it was working, but I can do that later.
Yeah.
Archie, you're having a delayed echo now. Do you have two microphones on?
No, just the one. I can back out and come back in and see if that fixes it.
Yeah, I would recommend that.
Is that better?
Yeah,
that's much better.
Archie.
Great. And could you open up the video again?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have the slides up anymore, Archie.
I'll get that for you right now.
And once he pulls it up, Alan, it's going to ask you to hit the control again so that you can take control of the slides. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I guess I don't remember how to do that.
You should have control, Alan.
Yeah, I seem to.
Yep.
How do I swap screens? I'd rather have it on my left-hand screen than my right, and I don't seem to be able to do that. Any idea?
It should be a window for you. So if you hit your escape button, you should be able to grab the top border and move it over to the left.
Yeah, it's not. No, I mean, it's scrolling down through the slides, but it's not. I don't know. Let me look at this. I could say exit full screen, but I'm nervous about doing that.
Yeah, you won't be able to move it if you're full screen.
Okay, so I exited full screen. Okay. All right. All right. And now I can go back to full screen just by hitting the bar box. Okay. Got it.
All right.
Okay, are you guys ready?
Sure.
All right, let's start. Okay, we'll give it just a minute as the participants arrive.
Whoa, I'm not doing anything and it's advancing
That's me.
slides. What?
I was trying to hit the continue on the recording here.
Which I hit also, yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Can't get that off of there.
Okay, it looks like we've got a good amount of participation. Are the slides ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, great. This is Sarah Westbrook. I'm from the Idaho Association of Counties, and we are happy to host this budget and levy training with the Idaho State Tax Commission. And would like to get things started. Just so you all know, if you have any questions, either raise your hand and I'll call on you for Alan or Archie. Or if it would be easier for you, if you don't have a microphone, then you can use the chat box and we'll be monitoring that as well. So Judy Wilson, I see that you said that you are that you typed in the chat box, so I can see that. So if you have a question on there, feel free to just shoot your question through the chat. That's the easiest way. Because it's a webinar, not a regular Zoom meeting, all the participants are muted. So just please use the chat box whenever you can. And we'll turn the time over to you guys. Alan, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and thanks to IAC for hosting this opportunity to meet with many of our stakeholders, taxing districts and counties alike, to discuss budget and levy. Obviously, we have some new material as well as the traditional material to cover because we want to give a comprehensive view of the budget and levy system and what's necessary for everybody to successfully complete their levy certification later this year. We do want to answer your questions to the extent that this format permits that. And of course, you can always email us and contact us later. Let's see if I can move a slide. Well, there it is. Okay. So I'm Alan Dornfest with the Tax Commission. And Archie, why don't you chime in for a second, please?
Yeah, good morning. My name's Archie. Many of you have talked to me and emailed me on various things. I will be happy to assist with any questions that you have. Feel free to email me. And if you don't have my contact information, I'm sure Sarah or Kristen can provide that to you as well.
Okay, thank you. And again, we know that we'll cover as much as we can today, but we definitely encourage you to ask questions as we move on through this this year. And in particular, in the new environment that we'll be discussing, but as well to be solid on the basic requirements as well. So with that, there it is. We're going to again review new law. That's House Bill 389 for the most part, but a few others as well. And existing laws that affect tax revenue, property tax revenue for taxing districts. We want you in discussing this to understand the limits, how those limits are computed, and then it's the district's choice on going how far below those limits. That's not up to us, that's up to you. We have a new term to discuss this year, preliminary levy rates. And that new terms like that have to do with this bill that just passed a week or so ago, House Bill 389. And we'll talk about those and how they're used in conjunction with your budgets during the session this morning. And we'll also talk about all the different forms. And please bear with us, be a little bit patient. I know it's really hard, but we are still in the process of developing and redeveloping or amending forms such as our L2 budget certification form and some of the adjunctive forms to make sure that we're properly accommodating everybody with respect to the changes in 389. And we really couldn't do those very much in advance. So, you know, it is an ongoing process trying to get all of that done. We'll have them up and ready for you as soon as we possibly can. We do want to do some testing of some of the forms with some of our county folks to make sure it's all working. Okay. We'll also talk about where to get information and what documentation to provide. Okay. When we talk about property tax, we're talking about budgeted amounts and revenue, not expenditures. And we really can't offer much advice in the area of expenditures. So we always suggest that you go to your associations, your legal advisors, and the like, independent auditors, and so forth. The second part of this is compliance. So there are going to be some new fields and some old fields on the L2 form for you to certify that you've done things correctly. And we don't challenge those sorts of things. But we do step in if they're incomplete, and they do need to be complete, and B, if some taxpayer or stakeholders challenges any of the information. And I see the chat on here, and yes, we will be making at least a link available to the PowerPoints and getting that information out. I believe that'll be probably both on the IAC website and at some point in the not very distant future on the Tax Commission's website as well. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so continuing on, we assume compliance unless there's a challenge. If there is a challenge, you need to be prepared, taxing districts folks, you need to be prepared to support and document whatever it is you're claiming. If you're a school district and you have an emergency fund and we get a challenge saying you didn't qualify, then be prepared to send us some sort of record of increasing attendance, for example, whatever. In other cases, we'll ask for, and the counties will ask you for your publications of budget hearing notice and maybe some other types of documentation. We will always ask for resolutions with regard to either using or reserving additional foregone budget authority. Okay. These are the general responsibilities of taxing districts. There's been there's a slight change to this from previous years, but not very much. So the first thing was April 30th. That's an annual requirement to notify your county clerks of your budget hearing dates and locations. There is a procedure for changing if you need to. Legislative Services has certain requirements for districts to register, and we'll have some more information on that later, but those are ongoing annual requirements as well. Those only pertain to non-school districts. And you have to go through your own statutes and so forth and figure out what the requirements are for advertising your budget, for holding hearings, and so forth. The best advice I can give you is make sure you have that down, consult with other districts of your same nature, or ask your legal advisors if you have questions on that. Foregone amounts are amounts that you were entitled to take, amounts of increases in your property tax that you were entitled to take in prior years and chose not to. There are now requirements if you want to pull some of that money into your budget, in other words, have your taxpayers actually pay it, that you have to have public hearings and resolutions. When in doubt, call and we can talk more about that, and we'll show you some examples. Now there's an additional requirement as of last year. This actually started last year, that while it used to be automatic that if you didn't take your full budget growth that you were eligible for, you accrued additional foregone, and we tracked it, that's no longer the case, and you have to actually do a resolution for additional accrual, not for keeping what you've had. If you have $1 million of foregone on the books, it's not going to go away, at least under current law. But if you wanted to accrue more because you didn't take your full budget increase this year, let's say, you would have to notify us and have a resolution to that effect by the end of 2021. It's now too late to do that type of resolution for last year, for 2020. And these are calendar years. Don't get mixed up between calendar year and fiscal year. So a couple of other things: you have to certify your budget to the county commissioners, usually through your county clerk, and you have to sign your L2 form and send this information and any supportive documentation in to the county by the 9th of September this year. You can request a 7-day working extension. There's the other due date, and school emergency funds have a slightly different due date. This is the statutory requirement on the budget hearing notification we've already talked about. If you have failed to do this, and every year we have a handful of districts that do fail, then you get locked in basically at last year's property tax budget.
Hey,
So,
Alan,
yes.
we have a question about what happens to the foregone money if it isn't taken, i.e. if they don't do the resolution to keep it.
Okay, the resolution is not to keep the previously accrued, it's to accrue more or to take some or all of what you have. So again, if a district had $1 million in previously accrued foregone, let's say through 2019, okay, you were notified at that time you had $1 million in foregone, and then in 2020 you didn't do anything, and you could have accrued an extra 10,000. Well, you wouldn't accrue the 10,000, but you'd still keep the $1 million on the books. Hopefully that answers the question.
And if I could chime in, a good way to think about the resolution as it relates to your foregone is you do a resolution to either accrue, add more foregone to your balance, or a resolution to use it, subtract foregone from your balance. Whatever you have previously gained or used will be recorded and stay on file. But just think of the resolution that way. If you want to use or gain more foregone, you need a resolution.
Sorry. Okay, so keep continuing. Do we have another question from Matt Nielsen?
I think so.
Sarah, do we have a question or?
I don't see another question.
Oh, okay, because I had seen one on the bottom here, but we'll keep going. And if there is a question, please type it into chat and we'll be glad to answer it, okay? Okay. Oops, okay, all right. So districts sometimes get confused about who has what as far as public hearing requirements are concerned. Now, remember that to take foregone, there's always a public hearing requirement. It may be in conjunction with your budget hearing. Some of you, such as, excuse me, some of the cemetery districts and auditorium districts of certain types are not required, and community colleges are not required to do budget hearings, in which case you could do a separate public hearing of some sort for the to take foregone. So these are some of the rules we've been able to ascertain from the laws. Most of you do have requirements to do budget hearings. This is the information for the LSO, local, that's Legislative Services Organization, contact and for their registry. Your contact at LSO is Shelley Sheridan, who's really great to work with. And you notice the requirements on here. Some agencies or entities, taxing districts and the like, are required to do an audit. You see the rules for that. If you have any questions, we're not going to be able to really answer them. It's Shelley to whom those questions should go. However, Shelley sends us lists of non-compliant entities by September 1st, and shortly thereafter, we really have to have compliance with their requirements, or again, you get your property tax frozen. And in this case, if you were getting sales tax money from the state, it would also be withheld. And we have several non-compliant districts, including some cities, having their sales tax withheld right now. That sales tax, upon getting back into compliance, will be resumed or be released by our agency, but not until the quarter following the quarter you get back in compliance. Please contact Shelley if you have questions on this. This just goes through the state and county roles in this process. The assessor is in charge of providing value information to the county clerk and also developing the new construction role. We're going to have some changes there, so let's come back and talk about that a little bit later. But the assessor is in charge of that part of the process. The county clerk provides and generally operates as a liaison between county commissioners and us, the tax commission, and you, the taxing districts, and provides value and tax information of all sorts to the districts. Many times it's through links with our agency, but sometimes not. And ultimately is our main contact too. Not that you shouldn't or couldn't contact us, you certainly are encouraged to, but we strongly encourage all the districts to communicate frequently and openly with your county clerks. They're sort of your first line out there, and you need to be maintaining those lines of communication. They ultimately distribute taxes that come into the county to you as well. County commissioners set the levy rate, approve the property tax portion of your budget, and submit all this information to us. The dates are down there. We have review and approval responsibilities, and we have our goal is to ensure that the various limits are not exceeded. We have till the fourth Monday of October to complete our operation on this. We also determine and apportion operating property values. Those are public utilities and railroads. And most of you, especially unless you're a fire district or a flood control district, typically levy tax on both the homes and the businesses in your community and the farmland, and also the railroads and properties, pipelines and other operating property. That comes out a little bit later in the year, is not finalized till September, and we'll talk more about that. We provide technical assistance. We develop administrative rules and guidance notes, I might add, of which we've already sent 2 related to House Bill 389 out to the counties, and those are available on request and will be on our website as well. Although they're pretty technical detail in terms of what the counties need to do to comply, but we'll gladly share them if it would be of assistance to anybody else. We have mapping responsibilities too. You have to tell us your boundaries and make sure that we can map those, and similar responsibilities with regard to urban renewal areas. We distribute sales tax revenue sharing, some directly to taxing districts, such as cities and counties, most through counties to the what we call special purpose taxing districts. And as well, we distribute property tax replacements such as for ag equipment or personal property. And we will have a new component, but not until late 22, of property tax replacement dollars. We'll talk more about that in relation to House Bill 389. We've got a few other tasks on here as well, such as gross earnings tax and solar, wind, some of the alternative taxes. So we always talk about years in terms of tax year or calendar year. We are just entering into 21. The taxes that I just got through mailing to my county yesterday are not for 21. They are for 20, and I made my second half payment yesterday. So it's important to keep this straight. On your L2 form, we don't really care. You could say 21 or FY22 if you prefer, but do know that when we talk about this, we will be talking about those as your 21 taxes, not your 22 taxes. This is the general formula for tax rates. Many people don't understand this. But it's always done this way. Your property tax, after subtracting all of your non-property tax revenue, the amount you want from property tax is divided by net taxable value. And that gets a rate, which is then multiplied by each taxpayer's property value in your particular district. So, computing the maximum, these are the basic rules. And they have changed this year, and the bolded ones are some of the changes, although there's a couple non-bolded changes on here. We start with, to get your maximum, non-exempt. So the word non-exempt, first of all, refers to generally all of your property tax, except for things like voter-approved stuff, special funds like school emergency funds, special funds like judgments, and things of that nature. Otherwise, it's all non-exempt. If it's your general operating budget to pay your salaries and maintenance and so forth, that's non-exempt. So that amount, the highest of the last 3 years, which we've got that number on our website, and you should know how to link to that. If not, we can send you that, is allowed to have a 3% increase. In addition, any solar farm tax is added to that. I might add that first bullet includes what we call the basic replacement money, such as the personal property replacement money and the agricultural replacement money that many of you get. So that highest amount then is, you can add 3% to it. You cannot add 3% to the solar farm tax. That's why it's separated here. In addition to that, then, the county will soon be developing a new construction rule representing new construction, new properties, and so forth in your district. That amount this year will represent only 90% of what it used to represent. That's because of the bill that passed, 389. So that bill restricted you. So in the past, if a property worth $100,000, let's say a new C-store worth $100,000 was added last year, the county would have picked it up at $100,000 this year, and you would have gotten that in your new construction roll. Now and into the future, they will only pick that up at $90,000. Secondly, it used to be that you multiplied that by the prior year's levy rate, and we don't do that anymore. That has been superseded by House Bill 389, which requires you to use a special preliminary levy rate that Archie will demonstrate the calculation of in a little while. No, you cannot calculate that now. No, it is not the same as your prior year's levy rate, and I'm sorry, but we don't know it today. We'll come back to that. In addition, you get 90% of your annexation value. So there are a couple of exceptions to this for fire districts that have annexed cities. So let's leave those off the table for now. But with that exception, if you annex property into your district, you get 90% of the annexation value, and that's multiplied by a separate preliminary levy rate that we also won't know for some time. We'll cover that a little bit later. Now, if those three components, the budget plus 3%, the new construction, the annexation exceed 8%, then you're not allowed to have more than 8%. Okay. Eventually, we're going to subtract the replacement money so that you don't double dip in that area. And then you're allowed to add above the 8% and above whatever the other computations gave you, foregone amount that you have a resolution for and decide to pull in from previously accrued foregone. Now, you're generally allowed an increase in your budget of 1% for foregone. You're also allowed 3% if you have a capital project. You could go and take as much foregone as you want up to your levy rate limits if you forego all of the above increases. In other words, you don't take the 3% increase on the first bullet, you don't take the new construction, you don't take the annexation. That's another step within, or allowance, I guess, within the House Bill 389. These are the replacement monies. Most of you get agricultural equipment replacement, which was from an exemption that was passed in 2001, and that amount has been locked. If you are not getting any of that money, it probably means you didn't levy on that type of property back in 2001, or you're a new district created since 2001. Personal property replacement is similarly fixed at 2013 amounts. So again, most districts get that, some do not. There's a few type of replacements or recoveries that are sort of more random. Some counties recover improperly claimed homeowners exemptions and distribute that money. You will get all of that information from your county by early August each year. The only one that's not added back, so this is a bit confusing because it's not referring to the previously discussed ag and personal and homeowners exemption replacement or recoveries, but the solar farm replacement is a specialized one, and that one is not added back in. Not for the highest of the 3 years at any rate. So let's talk a little bit more about foregone, since this has substantially changed and the procedures have changed in recent years. The basic definition is the same. It's the amount of a previously allowed increase in non-exempt property tax portion of your budget that was not taken. I want to point out the word increase here too. We've had some districts cut their budgets dramatically in certain years. You do not earn foregone for that except on the amount you could have increased. So cutting a budget from 500,000 to 300,000 simply does not generate 200,000 in foregone. It'd still be the 500,000 plus 3% that it would generate. So this simple example says, okay, it's certified and the highest amount was 100,000. There's none of these other replacement monies and new construction and so on. Normally that district could have 3% or $3,000. The district chooses only to take $2,000 increase, so it has a foregone amount available of $1,000, provided, however, that it had to do a resolution by December of 2020, saying simply that it wanted to reserve or retain or accumulate this additional $1,000. So, let me go back one step. Okay. This bottom bullet says that it never expires and once taken becomes part of future calculations. That's true, except for one thing. If you went with more than a 1% increase in your budget, okay, then in that case, you would have to, if you went with the 3% capital project increase, let me say it that way. I'll come back to the question in just a minute. If you went with the 3% capital project increase, that would have to be subtracted once the capital project is done. I'm sorry, could somebody repeat that question that just came in?
Tyler Lewis asked, so are you saying that we can take 8% plus 1% foregone ongoing?
Yes.
That's correct, generally, yes.
As long as they have the foregone.
Yeah, they have to have it on the books already. And if
Yeah.
you're wondering if you have it, I believe Archie can clarify, but I believe that's on the maximum budget site on our website.
The maximum budget and foregone worksheets.
Yeah.
Yes, the report there that we have on file shows your foregone that we have for you up till now. We've run into situations over the past year where districts thought it was like it was before in prior legislation, where the foregone would automatically accrue, which caused a situation where they thought they had more foregone than they actually do. However, if you look on that report on our website, that'll show you your current foregone. And with that, you can do, there's 3 different options with foregone that we'll go over here shortly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first of all, foregone doesn't pertain to schools. Okay, so if you don't have any budget increase, and I talked about the 1% or the 3% a little bit, we'll come back to that. But if you elect not to take your 3%, your normal 3%, not to take new construction, not to take annexation, okay, all 3 of those, then you can take as much foregone as you like, provided your rate, the levy rate that you have, doesn't go over your maximum levy rate. For instance, for a city, your general fund maximum levy rate is 0.009. So you might have a ton of foregons reserved already. You could take it provided it doesn't push your rate over that 0.009. Okay. And also, you would not get to reserve any of the 3% or new construction or annexation. So it wouldn't pump your foregone up and allow you to take it. But this provision is not subject to the 8% cap. If by taking all your foregone, you were able to raise your budget and still stay under your levy rate limit, you were able to raise your budget 25%, you would be allowed to do so. Okay, the capital project provision of law is quite different. That says, okay, you could still take your normal 3%. I know too many threes here, but you could still take your normal 3% and all of that, new construction, et cetera. And then you can increase that budget up to 3% over 8% or over the 3% plus new construction, et cetera, provided you have what's called a capital project. And we will be asking you to certify that on the L2 form in a special box that you will check off. And you will provide for us in this instance, you will fill out a special form called the what? Capital Project Tracker Form? Does that sound right? Okay, great. We're still working on names of all these things, okay? And you would then show us each year that the capital project either is still going on and needs more money or that it's completed. At the time it's completed, you have to subtract the cumulative amount, so from your budget the year after it's completed. So let's say you had one of these capital projects and you used $10,000 of foregone for it for 3 years. Okay, each of 3 years. At the end of that time, you would have to subtract $30,000 from your budget. We're going to ask you if you have a capital project to treat it sort of like an override. In other words, I know the voters aren't approving it in this case, but we're asking you to show it as a separate line item. And then since it's not a special fund, we would add it to your general fund or whatever, your M&O or general fund, to check for levy limits. You still couldn't go over levy limits with it. So it's going to be a little bit confusing that way, but we have to show it as a separate line item because it itself is not eligible for future 3% increases. So in other words, in the example I just gave you, you took $10,000 of foregone for this capital project. Do you get 3% more than that in your budget the following year? No, you do not. So here's an example of foregone, 100,000 highest, Normal 3% gives you $3,000. $2,000 for new construction. Don't worry about calculating. We're just saying let's assume that's correct. So that's 5,000. You can see that that's under the 8% limit anyway. If there's no capital project, you could go up 1%, which would be 1% of that highest number, not the 100,000 notice, but the 105,000. So you'd get 1,050. Okay, if you had that much in your foregone account or balance. And then if you had a capital project, it would be 3%, and you could go to 108,150. Yes, I realize 108,150 is more than an 8% increase over 100,000, but that's perfectly fine in this instance. Okay, a little bit more about some other legislation, and then we'll circle back through the forms and that type of information and show some calculations. So this one passed last year. This is the bill that said in order to gain more foregone, when you don't take all of your 3% or whatever, then you have to reserve it. Okay, and this tells you the steps in that, adopting a resolution. We have some sample resolutions if you want to see one, but you know, there's no actual specification in law or rule of what constitutes a resolution. But you have to provide the public with your intent, hold a public hearing, and adopt the resolution. Otherwise, you can't recover that additional foregone, and we won't track it. So there's sort of three options. Okay, a resolution to reserve all, or you could reserve part. You don't have to reserve the whole thing, in which case your existing foregone goes up. A resolution to recover part. In other words, to say, I've got 10,000 foregone on the books. I'm going to put 5,000 into my budget this year. Yes, it's under the 1% or whatever. And then we reduce your existing foregone. Do nothing, and we will leave your foregone alone. We won't change it. We won't reduce it. We won't increase it. This is an example of the resolution, just a one type of resolution. Just again, for information purposes, you don't have to use this one by any means. Another bill passed last year amended the sales tax distribution formula and changed some of the procedures. So for cities, it combined the base and excess and revenue sharing into one distribution. I believe that distribution is now made by us rather than by the counties. County revenue sharing did not change on this, and special purpose taxing districts, your revenue sharing or sales tax rather, did not change on this, and that still comes to you from the counties. We started distributing on the new formula in July, basically, of 2020. And a different department in our agency, not property tax department that Archie and I work in, but management services is responsible for those distributions to cities and counties. There's contact information. Highway districts. There was a change with respect to highway districts that overlap urban renewal areas known as revenue allocation areas. So this is very specific, only in relation to those cases. And basically, if the, let's see, we have another question coming in. In terms of the foregone resolution, to take the foregone in that year, I would say it should, if you have a budget hearing requirement, it should happen at the same time as that. If you failed to do it, then you could schedule another hearing, but it's going to change your budget. So I think you would need another budget hearing as well. If you're talking about reserving additional foregone, you could do that at a later time at a public hearing, provided that you do so or did so for last year before the end of last year. Hopefully that answers that question. So in the case of highway districts, if a new urban renewal area came in to your highway district after July 1, or on or after, I guess, July 1 of 2020, then the highway district will get some of the money that was previously paid to the urban renewal district. There's an exception for this if there's an agreement between the highway district and the urban renewal agency that allows the urban renewal agency by reason of it providing highway maintenance services that allows the urban renewal agency to keep the money. If this is happening, highway districts and urban renewal agencies and counties, we need to have documentation on this. So I'll move on, but we would need documentation. This just goes through calculations on the highway district levies, and it will not change the levy process. This is really an issue we're working on with counties. The default will be that we will assume that there is no agreement and that the urban renewal agency is not providing highway services. If that's incorrect and the urban renewal revenue allocation area was formed July 1 of 2020 or later, we need to have that agreement. Okay, these are some general changes to House Bill 389. Some of these affect taxpayers in general, and we thought it would be useful to just share them with you a little bit, and some of them affect the budget and levy process directly. Some of them are in play for 2021, meaning right now. Some of them go into play next year in 2022, so we need to parse this system out. And these are the major changes. So in general, the homeowner's exemption that previously was capped at 50% up to $100,000 maximum exemption, that is immediately moved to $125,000. You know, we have a lot of values going up around the state, so it's a little difficult to say what that will do ultimately to your tax base in your area. It may lower it, or it may just reduce the rate of increase.
Hey, Alan, real quick, before you dive too deep into this, it looks like we have one more question on foregone.
Okay.
They're wondering about when the foregone resolution needs to happen. Does it have to happen at the same time as the budget hearing?
Okay.
The example is that there's a budget hearing that's coming up on June 9th, and they're wondering if they're too late to reserve foregone.
Are we talking, I need to know if we're talking about reserving it or if we're talking about using it. No, they're not too late to reserve it for next year, basically. They are too late. They were too late as of December of last year to reserve it for last year's budget. So it depends on which year we're talking about. If we're talking about moving ahead, though, let's say they're not going to take an increase for this year and they're going to reserve what they could have taken as an increase in foregone later this year. That would be allowable up till December of this year. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So again, we have the homeowner's exemption change immediately. We also have what's called a site improvement exemption. That's for, say, land that's being developed. And it used to be that as soon as the foundation was laid, that site improvement exemption, which I believe is a 75% exemption on the land, excuse me, was lost, but that's not lost now until completion of the improvements. So counties may have to go back and restore some of those or contact the owners. The circuit breaker program, which is state-funded tax relief, the brackets were increased to a maximum of $1,500, and in fact, all of the brackets were increased. We're working with counties on that. That will provide additional benefits this year to circuit breaker recipients. We'll talk more about that, the other part of that, in a minute. On the budget and levy side, there's a prior to this year, when land changed use, like went from farmland to home sites, even without building, it went up in value, and the new construction rolls captured that value increase. That will no longer occur. That value increase will only occur on the land portion when the building is, when it's associated with the building. If it's a commercial building, it could be associated with a partial new construction. If it's residential, the land change will not be picked up until the building is actually, the house, for instance, is actually occupied. So that will restrict what's on the new construction rolls with respect to change of land use. and that's in effect immediately. We talked about the 90% provision. If an urban renewal agency or its revenue allocation area dissolves or has a de-annexation, and there are a few of those going on in the state right now, you used to get 100% of the increment value increase over the 2006 number, and now you'll only get 80% of that increase as new construction. We talked about annexation already. And we'll come back on preliminary levy rate, and there's this 8% overall cap with the exception of foregone. Okay, next year we have some additional changes. Next year, 2022, circuit breaker claimants who otherwise qualify by reason of their income but have an assessed value of their home before homeowners exemption more than 25% higher than the median in your county will simply be disqualified from benefits on that program, even if they meet all other criteria. Secondly, what's called transient personal property, which is construction, mining, and timber equipment that moves around from place to place and is present in more than one county during the year, I guess for periods of 30 days or more. That will simply be exempt and will no longer be taxable. There will be no replacement money associated with that. And then there's the personal property exemption, which currently stands and remains at $100,000 per taxpayer per county for the year 2021. That goes to $250,000 in 2022, notwithstanding the transient part, which is just completely exempt no matter what its value is. And late in 2022, we will be calculating replacement money for every taxing district that levies against personal property. And the checks for that will be distributed in December of 2022. Watch for more detail on that later. But the checks will not be for the full $250,000. The checks will represent the difference between the current $100,000 and up to $250,000. So a maximum of $150,000 in value exemption for each property will generate additional replacement money. Okay, I see a question here about new construction putting us at 8%, and we put 3% in foregone. Okay, so you're saying just the new construction alone, I guess from that example, would put you at 8%. You could put 3% in foregone. Could you use foregone as well? It kind of should net out. So, I mean, if you're pulling 1% out and you're adding 3%, effectively you're adding 2%. Is that not correct? So maybe I'm missing something, but using it and accruing it at the same time should just have a netting out effect, in my opinion. Let's move on here. There's another provision in 22 that says, obviously we have the homeowner's exemption going up. So somebody with a $250,000 home in 21 and 22 will get a $125,000 homeowner's exemption. That's a $25,000 increase in that exemption. Taxing districts will be given an opportunity in 22, not in 21, to subtract that additional $25,000 or whatever the accumulated amount is in your district from their new construction rolls, if they wish, beginning in 22. We're hoping to have some reporting ability for that. We're still working on that aspect of things. And then the third Monday in November is when the personal property amounts will be calculated by taxing district. We'll have more information on that as we move into next year. Okay. I seem to be having some trouble advancing my slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So we're just going to go briefly through the basic procedures, which really haven't changed, but just so everybody's on the same playing field here. And then Archie will talk about some of the calculations and some of the forms. So this is our basic 3% limit. It's found in that code section, and it's still there. Please be sure you're looking at House Bill 389, which completely recodified this, or you'll get totally confused. You'll look at an old law. You'll say none of the stuff I've been talking about is in there, and you'll be right, but you'll be wrong because you'll be looking at old law. So be sure you're looking at the bill, House Bill 389 from this year. Districts have two types of limits. They have the budget limit in 802 and they have a rate limit. And you have to pay attention to both of those. This just demonstrates the rate limit by taking a budget, dividing by a value and saying, whoops, this district's over the 0004 limit that it has in law. So it either has to roll back $5,000 otherwise allowed, or it has to separate out a fund like a tort fund or something, and it could do that, possibly. Okay, so the maximum. If we have the last 3 years levied amount, these numbers, you see them in the top row, and then we have $28 in ag replacement money and $1,318 in personal property replacement money and a little bit of covered homeowners exemption. The total of all of those, the bottom line, the total levied plus replacement is what's used for the 3%. In this case, the highest is the 137, and the district can have a $4,000 increase. If it chose not to use that, it could essentially bank the 4,000 as unused foregone with a resolution. So plus districts get new construction. Now, again, they're going to get it at 90%, and these are the issues. These are the new construction amounts. We've changed the change of land use, as I mentioned. When we have a house under construction, it's called exempt under inventory, and it loses that eventually, and it gets picked up. If there are errors such as prior eligible new construction, the county assessor can correct those for up to 5 years, et cetera. And then 80% on the increment value on dissolving revenue allocation areas, as I mentioned. Those are the things that are on the new construction roll. There are subtractions occasionally from the new construction roll. These are rare. They do happen when land, for instance, goes from ag to residential and then back to ag, things of that nature. And then next year, there'll be a discretionary subtraction. So here's an example of how new construction is calculated into your budget. And Archie will show you the preliminary levy calculation in a moment, but this is the general principle. So you have a highest budget of the last 3 years, including replacement of $1 million even. You could have a 3% increase. There's $30,000. And then you have, this is really the way the preliminary levy is computed. So this July, the county finishes its valuation process, which goes through the county commissioners when they meet as Board of Equalization up until about the second Monday of July. Sometimes there are extensions of a couple of weeks, however. And the county says, okay, the new construction appears to be, let's see, help me out here, Archie. This is the total value or the new construction?
Yeah, let me step in.
Yeah,
So,
you step in.
yeah, you have your highs of the last 3 years here, the 30,000 from the 3% that you talked about. This $40 million represents your 2021 equalized locally assessed value. And then the 470,000 it would be your operating property from the prior year. Those would be added.
I'm sorry, would both of those be new construction values or total? I think we're missing a zero is my point.
So where?
Are they, well, are they new? Because you've got a divisor, I'm sorry, you've got a divisor of 470,000.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Let me continue, Alan. So you would add together your July 2021 equalized locally assessed value and your last year's operating property. Then you would divide your property tax budget being your 1 million plus your 3% divided by that, your net taxable and last year's operating property, to develop your preliminary levy rate. Once you have this number, you'll be able to take this preliminary levy rate and multiply that by the 2021 new construction value. The thing is, for the taxing districts, you won't have to do this. We have a preliminary levy rate calculator that will do this for you. You just need to have your information available and enter it into the spreadsheet.
So the 40 million, for clarification, should have been 400 million in the first row,
Gotcha.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I apologize to the group for that. We've been trying to get these things together in a hurry. I'm sorry, but so the 400 million shown as 40 is really the total value of the locally assessed property. The 470,000 is last year's operating property. The total of the two is 400,470,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we do the division that Archie just said, come up with this rate. Okay. We will be working with you and with the counties on all of these numbers, but we cannot provide these at this time. There is no way this can be done at this time. In the prior years, you used prior years' levy rates, and they were available by now. This number, this 0.0257, cannot be determined until late July. Archie, anything to add there?
No, that's true. The only thing to add here that we'll talk about shortly is you will ultimately have, if you have an annexation, you will have a different preliminary levy rate for annexations.
Okay. Okay, moving on. So the total increase for 3% new construction annexation can go up to 8%. If it goes over that, except for foregone, then you can't go over that number. Foregone can go up an extra 1%, except for a capital project. It can go up 3% for a capital project. And if you don't use any part of those other increases, you could take as much at foregone as would get you, provided you don't go over a levy limit. Okay. House Bill 389 defines capital projects in this way. And really, it's going to be up to you to decide if your project fits this. We are not going to decide whether your project is a capital project or not. So, but you will have to sign off and attest to having a capital project. So, for the preliminary levy rate calculator, you'll be asked to do these things. Enter the highest amount that you already have from the maximum budget in foregone worksheet. Enter the prior year's operating property. Okay, if you don't know that, you will know that, or the county will notify you. We have that because that's the 2020 operating property value. The 3% question here in the second bullet is discretionary on the part of the taxing district. The law says you have to decide how much of the basic 3% increase you want before this preliminary levy rate can be calculated. People have been asking us, why don't we just use 3% there? That would not be keeping with the statute. If you, the taxing district, you're the authority, you wish to use 3%, then you can do so, and you can tell us that and put it in the spreadsheet Archie's going to demonstrate, and so on. But it's not proper under the statute for us or anybody else other than the taxing district itself to make that decision. So we feel pretty strongly on that based on the wordage in the statute. You can pick 0, you can pick 1, you can pick 1.5, you can pick 3. That's up to you. The current equalized value, like that 400 million in the last example, will be provided by the county about the first week of August. They may have it a little earlier than that, but I can't guarantee that. Counties have been instructed that if they're accustomed to adding subsequent roll numbers when they set levies, they can do so if they know those numbers in early August. That's a choice the county will have to make in working with the districts. And then in addition, there'll have to be a net local annexation value if your district had an annexation where it added to its boundaries last year. So once all this is available, there'll be either 1 or 2 preliminary levy rates. And I think maybe at this point, since we're referring to cells, Archie, maybe I should turn this over to you at this point.
Yeah, so on the preliminary levy rate calculator, there are reference cells that will match to what your L2 worksheet looks like. So for instance, this second bullet here says, cell Q has the highest non-exempt property tax budget prior to subtracting replacement dollars. That'll be the highest possible budget the district could have at the 8% cap. And it may not be attainable because functionally, your 8% cap, you may just be under that with the property tax budget that you propose. Or your maximum non-exempt property tax budget may be above that, in which case you come down to the 8% cap. That's where that really comes into effect. One moment. Here's an example of the preliminary levy rate calculator. You'll see here we have the rows and they're labeled with a letter. So A being your highest non-exempt property tax budget, B being your 2020 operating property value, that's last year. And then you will enter C here, your estimated required base budget growth. And that's what Alan was talking about. That will be up to you of how much do you want this growth to be. For our example, we put in 3% because we just wanted to go for the max here. And you'll notice down here at the bottom in row N, it is locked at 3% because here what we're doing is we're calculating your maximum allowable base budget growth. So the absolute max you could possibly have, which can, like Alan said, be different from you actually want. In addition to this information here, you'll add in your 2021 net taxable, as we talked about, and your annexation if you have it. If you were to have all these things, you then generate 2 different levy rates. One here will be your new construction preliminary levy rate and your annexation preliminary levy rate. With those, you'll use those on your L2 to calculate your budget increase from new construction and or annexation if you have one.
So Archie, let me interrupt for a second. Can you go through which fields the taxing district would need to enter and where they get that information, please? Okay.
So taxing districts, you would need to enter all of the green cells. For the highest non-exempt property tax budget, you would find that from your maximum budget from Foregoing Worksheet. Your 2020 operating property value would be on your prior year September value worksheet. And I'm sure your county would have that as well. The row C is really up to you. Like I said, if you want to put in there 1.15%, that's your choice. Your 2021 net taxable will be from your current year's September value worksheet. And your net taxable annexation value will also be from that 2021 September value worksheet. And a note about this is you're going to put in your actual net taxable annexation value. When you enter that net taxable annexation value into the L2, I've added a calculated field that will reduce it to 90%. At the bottom here to calculate your maximum non-exempt property tax budget, that's going to be done on your L2 as well, but we added that here just in case someone's already using this. They can look at it. You're going to put your new construction that's already reduced coming from the assessor, your full annexation value, and if you have an expiring urban renewal, that information would also come from the assessor's office, and you enter that on line M.
So let me add one thing, even though it's kind of scary hearing this September value stuff, because I know all you guys are needing to do this a lot earlier than September, or many of you are. So the counties will be sharing the locally assessed information, and if you don't have your operating property from the prior year with you around the first part of August. So do be aware of that.
Yeah. So hypothetically from this, let's look at column I here. We have this levy rate, 0.005898105. Going forward, we would take that levy rate and let's say your new construction roll value is 4.7 million. You would multiply that preliminary levy rate by the 4.7 million to gain 27,855 an additional budget allowance. So that's outside of your 3% increase from your highest of the last 3 years. The other side to that, going back to this sheet, is box J, annexation preliminary levy rate. That kind of the same thing as you would have done before with your prior year's levy rate. You would take that, reduce, and like I said, on the L2, I have a calculated field, but you would reduce the value of 525,000 down to 90%. That's the 473,175 here. And then you would multiply that number by the preliminary levy rate, giving you $2,790 in additional budget allowance in this case. Now, when you're thinking about all three of these things, your highest of the last 3 years, your 3%, new construction, and annexation, if you have one, that's what that 8% cap applies to. And further, back in the preliminary levy rate calculator, it does show you your cap growth. As you enter information in here, this will tell you what percentage of increase that is. So if you exceed 8%, this cell at the bottom here will turn red. So it should alert you to something. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to give us a call. I'm happy to work with you on this.
Yeah, let me add some just briefly. Number one, there are two different rates, and that is confusing. I'm sorry, but it's because of a special calculation for the annexed areas operating property from the prior year. It's almost impossible to calculate that, and we can't do it the same way as the other calculations, so we've had to build something in. Secondly, I want to thank IAC. Tim Hibbard helped us with the development of this spreadsheet. And that said, this is still a beta version, okay? And we are going to be sharing that with counties and getting some feedback. So it's not quite ready for prime time yet.
Kind of lost my footing there. Yeah, but that in general would be your annexation example. For instance, in this case, it would include your taxable real personal operating property, and then obviously the real and personal at 90%. Here's an example of a L2 with that new calculated field that I told you about. So that will be here on 7A. You would enter your preliminary levy rate for annexation on 7B. And you'd enter the full value of your annexation. That's important because if you reduce it by 10% and then enter it here, it's going to calculate an additional 10% off of it. So make sure you enter the full annexation value, and then it will spit out your 2790 here. Similarly, same thing with your new construction. However, that doesn't look much different except for the fact line 4 now says preliminary levy rate instead of prior year's levy rate. And you'll see that those slightly different numbers, but that would all go into your maximum non-exempt property tax budget. Alan also referenced that if you had a capital project, you would need to attest to having such. You would, on your dollar certification worksheet, you would initial here in this box that you have a capital project, and you would also need to start filling out the capital project worksheet. I have an example here of what that would look like year over year. So hypothetically speaking, let's say this is the second year that this district is levying for their capital project. They're reserving foregone for their capital project. So the first year, they allocated $25,000. So that meant that their total foregone was $525,000. We reduced that $25,000 off of it to $500,000 now. Down here, you'll see that this year, being 2022, I might add another column to show that it's 2022. They're requesting another $30,000. So in effect, what happens is you have $55,000 total that has been allocated to your capital project after 2 years. We're still working on this. It's a work in progress, but we're trying to figure out a good way to track that information year over year, because like Alan said, we're going to have to subtract that from your property tax budget at the completion date of your capital project. I added a line here for the estimated completion date if by chance districts have an idea of when that is. And yeah, that's basically it. At the end, at the bottom here, we have a total foregone remaining after the capital project, and then that should match the amounts that's going to be reported on your upcoming maximum budget and foregone worksheet.
I see a question on here. Can foregone only be used for capital projects? No,
No.
that's to go beyond the 1% to get
So
3%.
Yeah, so this is only, if we go back to thinking about foregone, this is only in the case that you're going to use the 3% option when taking your budget increases. Remember, so there's two options when you're going to take budget increases. 1%, you just take foregone, you do a resolution, and you take that 1% increase over the 8% if you were at it. Option 2 is this, where you're taking an additional 3%. So up to 11% of your property tax budget, you would need to fill this out. And if you are in that situation, feel free to contact me. We can talk to it together and figure out what's going to work for you, even if you just want to test it. We're here to help, and we're trying to make this as as digestible as possible for the taxing districts in the counties. A lot of this information is available on our website, like we've spoken about a few times here. This is an updated version of the maximum budget and foregone worksheet. If you go on to the State Tax Commission and go under our property tax hub, you'll be able to find that there. The new construction roll value, that you should have that the fourth Monday in July, and the annexation values locally assessed will be first Monday in August, operating property being the first Monday in September. So some of this information does come out pretty late in the year. This slide here is mostly about non-school funds that are exempt from the 3% annual increase, and thus also being exempt from the 8%. So within that, you have your temporary overrides, your permanent overrides, bonds, and plant facilities. These still can't exceed, well, especially in the case of the overrides, they can't exceed your funds levy limit. So that's something to still be aware of when going after those type of overrides. Bonds, you still need to have that 2/3 majority voter approval. And then plant facilities, I mean, that really applies to, like it says, the libraries and community colleges, as well as schools. So you're going to see that listed again here in a moment. Here is, I'm not sure that this is exhaustive, but this is many of the common funds you'll see for school districts. You have your temporary and permanent supplementals, emergency funds. That is typically used in the case of an excess in enrollment at a school. You have your judgment, tuition. There's only a few schools that applies to. If for some reason there's someone here who has a school that you believe that applies to, and it's not on this list, please contact us as soon as possible. We have our state authorized plant facility. Again, if you think you have one of these, please contact us as soon as possible, because to our knowledge, there's one in the state. But if you have any questions about any of these, or you think there's a school district that should be on here that's not, please contact us as soon as possible.
Let me mention one thing, if I could, please.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Judgments are also available for non-school districts, but only in the case of a judgment related to a value dispute that was settled in court or by the Board of Tax Appeals. There's several of these around the state. There's Shoshone County has a series of districts with these. There's Southern Idaho, what we call non-utility generators, and so on. So you'd get information from your county in terms of how much you would be permitted to levy, but those special judgment funds, as I indicated, are exempt from all the limits.
So getting back into some of the property tax forms, the L2 is kind of the main form that we're focusing on here today. But with that, you're going to bounce around a little bit between the maximum budget and foregone worksheet, the voter approved fund tracker, if you have any of the exempt funds we just talked about, the capital projects tracker, kind of as we just talked about, if you're going to take that 3% increase. And then all of those forms are going to be on our website. We apologize. We're currently working as quick as we can. They have them updated and accurate to what you need to submit later in the year. So bear with us. I can say confidently that we'll have the L2 forms, maximum budget and foregone is already on our website, and the associated forms up there at the absolute latest by the end of next week. This is our landing page. If you were to Google the State Tax Commission, this is typically where you're going to land. When you get here, please be sure to go to Property Tax Hub. I mean, unless you're looking for something else, please feel free to navigate freely and find whatever you need. But for property tax, hit the Property Tax Hub. Once you hit that, you'll come to here, your budget and levy forms and guides. An interesting note about this page that I like to mention to people is if for some reason you had a question about your operating property, if you were to scroll down just under here, it will show you your final values for operating property if you wanted to pull the reports directly from our team that reports those. However, getting back in the budget and levy, you would click on that link provided there. That would bring you here. This is usually where our previous year certification of L1s are, levy rates for the L1, budget hearing non-compliance lists, all the L2s, the maximum budget and foregone worksheet, etc. This last one is just our budget and reports. So this is specifically for our ag and personal property replacement reports if you need to find them. Usually, in my experience, the question about ag and personal property really becomes a flashpoint with school districts. To make that issue easier, I added a line to the maximum budget and foregone worksheet that shows the total. It shows the total replacement dollars allocated to torts and the actual total replacement dollars used. On your L2, you will want to report your total replacement dollars, not just the amount used to your tort. Other L2s that we have that will be updated are the highway district, school, generic, and to our knowledge currently, we're not using the governor's public safety grant initiative forms again. However, if that becomes a thing again, we will update those as well. Under Rule 803, L2 must be signed. We've talked to many counties about this. As long as you get it to them signed, we just need to have on file somewhere a signed L2 certifying that the L2 worksheet. Unless otherwise provided, you can't exceed the amount published in your notice of budget hearing. You can't be over that. You can definitely go lower. That's okay, but it's not transparent to the taxpayers to have a higher amount. If for some reason something like that happens, talk to us. I've heard situations where we have a district do an additional budget hearing to adjust their budget, but that all depends on the time of year and what's going on. The levy approved by us, we can't exceed the levy computed using the we can't exceed what's reported in the notice of budget hearing, and we can exceed the maximum statutory levy rates as well. On the L2 worksheet, you want to make sure you're subtracting all the monies on all the replacement dollars. That's done for you, and I highly recommend downloading the Excel version so you don't have to do the calculations on your own. You just put the information in, it calculates it for you, it makes it a lot easier. I've received some of them written out and come across errors. I mean, some people are better at math and arithmetic than others, but I recommend the Excel spreadsheet. It just makes it a lot easier on you, and it's probably faster. Here is an example of a maximum budget and foregone worksheet. Previously, this had a column that was the prior year's levy rate. We're not using that anymore. We're going to be generating the preliminary levy rates that we talked about. So, for instance, here under the highest non-exempt property tax budget plus replacements, this is going to be line 1 of your L2 worksheet. And a side note about that, if for some reason you have if your district has recovered homeowners exemption, that is not added into this number. So if you're trying to work back that number, how we got there, it's only your personal property and ag. So when you're getting your replacements, no solar, no recovered homeowners. Line 2 would be your 3% increase found here. However, that, again, like I said, it's a calculated field. As long as you put this number in, you will get that number. And then going back to foregone, that's reported on here. So this library district would have $2,750 in foregone. And depending on their budget and a myriad of other factors, as we've spoken about today, they could take up to that total. If they're not going to take a budget increase at all, they can take 1% of that. If they're doing a resolution, or if they have a capital project, they can take up to 3% based on their budget. Like I said, here is the example that I have. In this case, you'll see this is a school district. This shows the replacement dollars used. So this is their total replacement dollars. And this is the replacement dollars that was allocated to their tort fund. So the reason this shows the same number is because the tort fund zeroed out their replacement dollars. In the event that you have more replacement dollars than you do tort funds, you'll see 2 different numbers here. And in theory, this number, the replacement used, should always be higher. If it's not, I would reference those reports or simply just give me a call. We can work through it together. This is your non-school voter approved fund tracker. Please list any voter approved funds that you have. Insert your date of election, determine the initiative, the amount authorized by voters, and that needs to match what's on the dollar certification. Also, if you have a bond, if your bond refinances, you still maintain the original year that you got the bond. Do not move it out to the new year. We've had situations in the past where it has large effects on urban renewal. So we want to make sure we're getting the first year of that bond. Moving on, we have effectively the same thing with the addition of all the school-related approved funds. So same thing, make sure you're reporting accurately and make sure you're reporting the initial date of the fund, not a future date after a refinancing. Last thing before I leave this is on both voter approved fund trackers. There is a 20% change, and then we ask for an explanation. That's just for us and for you, really, to say, okay, why did your bond amount change 20% up or down in a given year? And just explaining why that happened. I mean, that might be something to cue you into a potential error. If we see it, we're going to contact you. Just want to make sure we're getting the right information out there. Here's an example of a school L2. So in this case, you see that the School is levying $35,000 for their supplemental. The tort was zeroed out by $10,000 in replacement dollars. Going over here, you'll see that the total amount of replacement dollars is $75,000. So when we think about it, what I was talking about earlier is this example. On your maximum budget and foregone worksheet, you would see $75,000 under replacement dollars used, even though under the total, which was the amount allocated to the tort, is only $10,000. If for some reason you see that your total here is not matching what's on your maximum budget and foregone worksheet, contact me and we're going to look at the reports together and make sure we can figure out what your actual replacement dollars should be. In school districts cases, and really in all taxing districts cases, replacement dollars don't change. It may look like it due to the allocation of funds to tort and other things, but they don't change. So keep an eye on that. An important thing here, and this is more for the county officials, but this is your levy rate calculation worksheet as it relates to that school district. We did not put urban renewal on here. However, that would be a potential option of changes in increment. As you can see here, their code is 1, 2, and 3. And that would depend on the date of the bond or supplement, well, in this case, let's say bond, and the inception date of the urban renewals. Alan, you want to pick up here?
Sure, I can. Basically, this is just sort of a public service announcement for changes in your district's boundaries. Please make sure that you send copies, if you're a taxing district, of all the maps and legals and so forth and ordinances to both your county and to the tax commission. The information is listed here. If we don't know about you, I can guarantee your change. I can guarantee you that we're doing operating property values wrong, if nothing else. So please do keep us in the loop. Ask us questions as you need. Do you want to go to the next slide, or I don't know if I'm in control of the name.
There.
We can also, this is just some general information on elections. Work with your county clerks on that for whether it's a new taxing district or what have you. There is some information will help you out if you're having trouble calculating the amount per $100,000 or something like that. I just did that with a library district a few weeks ago. Let's go to the next slide, please. There's also a procedure in law for changing the name of a district. Unless you have specific procedure somewhere else in your statutes, please take a look at this code. We don't just automatically change names of districts unless you go through a procedure. Next one, please. So this is important as a final slide today. This is all the information you have to send, the signed L2 form, the L2 worksheet. You're going to send your budget hearing notice as published in the paper or whatever to your county as well. And you don't send these, by the way, directly to us. If you're a taxing district, please send these to your county. They'll communicate directly with us, okay? The various forms that Archie has just said, there's some special ones for rec districts. Foregone amounts, we will need the resolutions. And if you're reserving new, well, you don't have to send it with the L2, but by the end of the year, don't forget. And the county may request some additional information.
Yeah. Oh, and it says on here, if you have a new voter approved fund please have a copy of that balance and send it to the county. In that first year, we're even going to want to see it. Subsequent years, not so much, but the first year, we want to make sure we all have the right information to make sure you're levying what you expect.
And let me make one more observation. I noticed as we were going through the slides, I apologize, there are a couple of typos. That 140 million that should have been 400. million, so forth. So I've asked Sarah to kind of pull this down from the website, and then we'll correct a couple of those things really in the next few hours here, and then get a more correct version. I apologize for any errors. Hey guys, I know this is confusing. I know it's a lot of new stuff. It's the biggest change we've seen in a very long time. Let's keep communicating. That's the main message. We'll work with you any way we can. And with that, thank you, IAC. I think we're done.